Hey everybody on YouTube. So in today's video, we're going to be going over The Witcher 3. There's a lot to cover, so let's get into it. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is an open-world action RPG that was released in May of 2015 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Windows PC. The game is the third in the Witcher series and was developed by CD Projekt Red. The game follows the Witcher Geralt of Rivia as he journeys to find his adoptive ward Ciri. The game features a vast open world, deep combat system, and a choice-driven plot. Right off the bat, the game's visuals are incredible. For years, people have been waiting for the next generation of graphics, and The Witcher 3 mostly delivered. The footage should really speak for itself. What's most amazing about the presentation of this game is what it renders without having a best-in-class graphics card. All of this footage is from a GTX 960, and it looks great. I only had to lower a few settings to get a smooth experience at 1080p. The draw distance, environmental lighting, and object detail are all impressive. However, it's disappointing that the game still uses outdated foliage rendering. So without a badass card like a 980 Ti, you're going to get foliage pop in and we'll have to lower the details to get a decent FPS. The game features an absolutely staggering amount of dialogue and cutscenes. The NPC faces and animation are some of the best I've seen, not only in detail, but in how unique each character looks. The lip syncing's good, but what's really impressive is the amount of emotion characters convey simply through facial movements. Stuff like furrowed brows or the way a character smiles tells the real feelings of the character. The cutscenes never seem to use generic camera angles and each conversation is framed well. During romantic or more personal moments, the game pulls in closer to the characters' faces, making it play more like a movie than an average video game. In any other game, the story could have dragged, but the presentation keeps you engaged. And like the rest of the presentation, the sound and music are exceptional. The soundtrack has some great tracks and a very consistent theme. The voice recording is high quality with a good variety of voice actors, though at times random NPC dialogue can get a bit repetitive. In The Witcher 3, you play as Geralt of Rivia, a notorious witcher. Witchers are an order of men for hire who use body modifications and ritualized training to defeat various deadly monsters for pay. These mutations leave the Witchers without much emotion, but they gain many supernatural abilities, including unnatural long life, increased combat skills, and generally heightened senses, known in the game as simply Witcher senses. I haven't played the first two games, so I don't know much about the backstory, but the plot of the game holds its own besides some of the lore I had to look up. I wouldn't say playing the other two games is a requirement, but in hindsight I definitely would have read a more detailed synopsis before I started the game. Early in the game, you're tracking your former love interest Yennefer, who had requested your assistance. Yennefer tracks you down first and takes you to the Emperor of Nilfgaard. The Emperor tells you that his daughter Ciri, who was Geralt's adoptive ward, is missing and is being pursued by the Wild Hunt, a group of scary-looking elves who want to use Ciri's natural elder blood for some bad shit, I guess. It's sort of vague what the Wild Hunt actually wants from Ciri, but it's bad. From there, the world opens up and you can either follow the main story or do side quests. There's no time limit to any of the main story quests, so you can do them at your own pace. The plot surrounding Ciri is easy enough to understand, so even if you get a bit overwhelmed by the lore like I did, you can still follow along. However, the entire story has the same issue that Fallout 4 ran into. Not enough time is spent establishing a connection between Geralt and Ciri. In the beginning of the game, you train and talk to Ciri for a matter of minutes, and are expected to have some kind of father-daughter bond. Complicating this is the fact that Ciri is no longer a young girl in the rest of the game, so she isn't even the character you interacted with. Ciri's story is told through several characters in the form of flashbacks, which is fine, but I never felt attached to her. It didn't seem like she needed Geralt, and the wild goose chase of finding her feels like an excuse to artificially extend the story. Luckily, each of the quests that gives you clues to Ciri's whereabouts are well written, and often come with their own side story. The Bloody Baron quest in particular is really weird, creepy, and sad, helping an alcoholic self-proclaimed Baron find his wife and daughter. On top of those plot issues, Geralt himself is difficult to relate to. He has a very cynical sense of humor, shows little emotion, and has seemingly no moral compass. Though this gives you the choice in how Geralt's story will unfold, it also distances him as a character. Because of his lack of visible emotion, decisions that will affect him down the line don't seem to hold much weight in the moment. Though he claims to be void of emotion, Geralt can romance a few select characters who he supposedly cares deeply for, but often the romance bits are balancing very precariously between a decent side story and total schlock. Luckily, the characters of Triss and Yennefer are well established and written, so the cheeky, innuendo-filled dialogue works most of the time. I enjoyed a particular side quest involving Geralt and Triss going to a fancy dress party. It was a nice change of pace and showed a different side to Geralt, which is something the game could have used more of. Choice in The Witcher 3 is an important feature. Throughout the game, you must make choices in dialogue and action that can have a lasting effect on the world. The choices tend to be very ambiguous. There's no clear-cut good or evil morality. You can be as nice or as mean as you want to be, and the game doesn't assign this a value or show you immediate results. Your behavior can backfire down the line, or simply saying the right thing at the right time can lead to a romance. Just like in life, things don't happen in a vacuum. And the game uses the sum of your choices to determine your path, not just black or white decisions, which is a welcome change of pace compared to most games that do the multiple endings thing. However, at times I feel the game forgets that you are playing a character. Geralt is not you, so your choices should be ones that he would feasibly make, and at times the choices can range from stuff that's altruistic, all the way to borderline sociopathic. Those kind of extremes don't establish who Geralt is, weakening the overall narrative. The Witcher 3's story borders on greatness, but it doesn't quite get there. Had the story been more fleshed out with a more relatable protagonist, it could have been a masterpiece. The Witcher 3 relies too much on the notion that a family-oriented story is enough to pull the player in. If we don't care about the characters involved, it doesn't really matter what relation they have, it'll always fall flat. The gameplay of The Witcher focuses around third-person combat, exploration, and strategic dialogue decisions. The combat comes off as twitchy sword fighting in an almost beat-em-up style, and early on it can seem like a button masher. The tutorials try to teach the game's combat features, but until you're surrounded by 5 people attacking you, you don't really get to understand how it all works. The combat is also unforgiving, protecting yourself is important, and if multiple people get the drop on you, you won't last long. Use a steel sword for humans, a silver sword for demons, and a variety of magical abilities for both. The magical abilities come in the form of 5 different signs. Each sign has an unlockable set of abilities, and each sign has a general focus. For example, the sign Quinn is defensive and offers upgradable magical shields. Igni uses fire as an attack power, and the sign Axii is used to stun or persuade enemies. Each sign is unlocked from the start, and every time you level up, you gain a point you can put into any of the 5 signs. Also, each sign's power can be increased by using the right mutagen, which is some sort of magical mutation that Witchers use. As the game progresses, you get up to 4 spots for mutagens, and matching the mutagen with the abilities increases their effectiveness. You can also combine mutagens for even more stat increases. Going over each ability would take too long, so just know the system is deep. It's got all the fun numbers and stats for RPG enthusiasts to study and perfect. I admit I tend to play on lower difficulties these days, and I don't get into the extreme build optimizations. The Witcher 3, even at lower difficulties, offers good upgrades and a feeling of progression. And if you really want to get into it, you can, but if you just want to experience the story and have some more laid-back fun, you can do that also. The swordplay of the game has gotten some flack for being too janky and twitchy. To an extent I agree with this, but only in the early parts of the game. Once you get a hang of it, the sword fighting is fun and challenging. It's not just a hack and slash game. You have to parry and dodge at the right times, but you also need to find the right opportunity to strike. Well-placed strikes do more damage, and you can kill your enemies fast. Trying to button mash won't work well. The Witcher makes you think about how you will approach fighting enemies. If you get caught off guard, they will kill you fast, even on easy. Having an attack plan can make for some fluid and fun sword fighting, with great slow-mo finishing moves. However, when you first start the game, the combat system is a bit overwhelming, so the fighting tends to be chaotic, which is why it can seem pretty twitchy. The game's world is absolutely massive, and horseback is the main way you'll travel. The horse mechanics are some of the better I've seen, but it's still not quite on par with Red Dead Redemption. Riding across bridges and going through villages, the horse can tend to get stuck. Riding slowly, your horse will follow paths, but riding fast can end up being a nightmare in some places, running into trees and awkwardly bouncing around until you find a trail. This isn't a big issue and I'm probably nitpicking, but it's odd to see such a wonky riding mechanic in a game where everything else seems so polished. Something I wasn't very impressed by was the inventory and general interface design. The default HUD just puts too much crap on the screen. I'm sure you can tell from the footage because at times it feels like you're playing the game through a window. The information on the HUD is certainly useful, and to keep track of everything, I didn't want to disable it, but I think they could have slimmed it down and offered the same amount of information. The inventory is clunky and feels old. Its Diablo-style inventory makes it hard to keep track of the loot since it all looks the same, but has totally different values and stats. The rest of the menu system is bloated and ugly. There are far too many menu screens. Some do very little, and some are very important. I could be in the minority here, but it just feels overly complicated. Very little can be done quickly, so I generally only use the menus when I had to. The gameplay of The Witcher 3 is solid. Its RPG elements are pretty traditional, so there's nothing really innovative going on here, but it's fun. And that's what really counts above all stupid gimmicks. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a fantastic game. It's one of the most ambitious games ever made, and CD Projekt Red really delivered a true open-world RPG experience. The story is simple enough for newcomers, but intricate in a way that makes you want to understand the lore. I think the pacing of the game suffers some from the nature of its open world, but makes up for it with well-written dialogue and creative quests. The combat is excellent, though it does take some time to learn. The presentation is definitely AAA quality, and deserving of being called next gen, even if they can't figure out how to render foliage without a f***ing $600 graphics card. So would I recommend The Witcher 3? Yes. This game was pretty much the unanimous game of the year in 2015, and there's a reason for that. It's rare to see games with the kind of detail and polish The Witcher 3 has. It's a big time investment, but it's totally worth it. Okay everybody, that was my video for this week. I hope you liked it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, I think you know what to do. Leave me a comment in the comments section and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one in the future. Coming up next week, I'm going to do a little video on Fallout 4 mods, some of the earlier mods. And then the week after, I'm going to be doing a video on the Game of Thrones game by Telltale. So I hope you check those out. See you then.